All right, Matt, Natasha, Tony, welcome to the Here's How podcast. This started off with an email to Matt being like, hey, you know what? I think you would be an amazing guest on this. I'd love to pick your brain on what you're doing because it's incredible and I see it from a bird's eye view. Some people from our organization have been they've been involved with either seeing your work or actually going to the shows. So already a lot of support there. And when I pitched it to you, I was like, we usually have a couple of guests on with you. So if you want to come on solo, that's great. If not, and then you gave me names and I was like, oh, these are people that I recognize from online. I've seen their stuff, seen their profiles on LinkedIn. I know a little bit about them, and it got me curious to how do you tie all of this together, right? And so for me, we've had people that have come on the podcast that have been entrepreneurs, and I think it's something that's really cool to celebrate and figuring out, how do you do entrepreneurship your way? How do you do it locally in Atlantic Canada? But what I found while trying to connect the dots with all of you is, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of chaos in entrepreneurship. And I think a lot of people, they're wondering about when am I going to be able to do the next show, or when am I going to get that next phone call to provide some marketing services, or when's somebody going to buy my book, that type of thing there. And they're all difficult things to navigate through. But all of you are doing something a little bit different. Now, obviously you are entrepreneurs, but it's bigger than that. You're empowering other people to run their businesses, and that's a big responsibility to take on, and I admire that. But I'm also curious to a lot of things. But where I want to start is, at what point did you figure out within you that you wanted to do something bigger than just for yourself? You wanted to empower others to do what they're passionate about.
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I would start with Matt.
Yeah, great question. I don't know. It's just it kind of happened over the years, right? I started my career as an abstract artist. A lot of people know me as Matt the artist. And it's funny because now I don't paint anymore. It's all about the shows, right? And when we go on the road, because we have shows in different cities, no one knows Matt the artist, right?
Okay.
Which is kind of crazy. And it just kind of snowballed over the years. And the whole thing about inspiring others, I realized that in year 3 of doing shows, when I realized that it shouldn't be about Matt LeBlanc anymore. Right. It should be about the full production and all the artists that are involved. Mm-hmm. Because the first couple shows that I did was to sell art. That was the whole point, right? Yeah. So instead of being out there and saying, buy art, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this event. There's no way I want to do the typical, right? I have a background in marketing like yourself, and I'm not about typical stuff, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do an event, have my art, but I want to entertain people, right? Yeah. So after I did that a couple years, that's when I realized, okay, I got to surround myself with other people, and that's where the inspiration came, right? Okay. So, having all these artists as part of a show, it's not about me anymore. It's about all the performers. Yeah. And I always say the way we build the shows is we build all these little boxes and we put the artists in their own box and we ask them to perform and do their art in that box, right? Yeah. So they kind of become inspired and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I can create something myself, right? Right. So that whole aspect to me just kind of came about, but that's the magic of the show now, right? Yeah. So, and a lot of people don't know this, but when we go on the road, we recruit locally. So we have shows in Fredericton, Halifax, Caracat, and we go over there and we recruit locally. So you could technically watch all the shows, they would all be different. The concept's the same, right? But it kind of changed based on the artist, right? Which is pretty magical. It's a nightmare. It's a logistic nightmare, right? But it works, right? Yeah. So that's kind of how it started.
You build a different type of canvas, a live canvas.
live
I
canvas.
admire that.
Yeah.
Like, I think with something like that, when your art just creates another form of art. I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Absolutely.
You're doing magic.
I'm trying.
What about both of you? How
Yeah,
did
for me, it was a moment in the growth of one of our companies in the property management world, right?
Yeah.
We manage apartment buildings,
Yeah.
and we grew the company fairly quickly over a few years, and then we started looking at what else we could start doing to add to the company.
Right.
So in my world of property management, we take care of apartment buildings for investors that
Yep.
want stuff.
Yep.
And then we started looking at and investigating the theories of what are other services that we could provide to people.
Okay.
And that led us down a path of getting into the landscaping and snow removal business.
Right,
So
okay.
we're like, okay, we're subbing a lot of this out. The vendors that we're working with weren't doing a great job. We always had a lot of problems. So we're like, why don't we try to do this ourselves, cut our teeth?
Okay.
So we invested, we bought a franchise, we brought that in-house, and we started doing our own stuff. And around three and a half years after that, we realized that company that we had grown was twice the size of my management company.
Okay. Wow.
And I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like I took this, it gave birth to this, and now it's much bigger than that. And it's really kind of diversified what we did, and it really forced us to be real entrepreneurs, because property management was what we knew, it's
Yeah.
what we were comfortable with. So
Yeah.
we started this new thing, which we knew nothing about, and it really allowed us to grow in a lot of different ways. And one day I was literally sitting at Starbucks in Dieppe on Champlain Street, and I'm like, this is too cool to kind of keep to my own. So I was writing my notes and my journaling, and I wrote Doorpreneur, which was
Right.
this name that was named at the time. I didn't know, but that's what became my book.
Right.
So I wrote the book to resonate with other property management owners around North America to see if my ideas sounded sound to them. And from there, the book was an exercise of, if it resonates, I'm going to start working and coaching these other property managers, our systems, to do what we did.
Right.
And that's where everything kind of blew up from there. So working and kind of sharing the ideas and the thought process to basically empower others to say, I can, take a small business, essentially turn it into a platform, and then grow like a vertical ecosystem of other companies.
Right.
And that's what we've been doing for the last 8-9 years now. So
Love it.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, for me, I'm a little different, I guess. Always, I think, to be honest, I think you can think of. I think of myself as a hockey player that keeps getting drafted,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
I really feel like that, right? And it started when I was 16 years old. I was walking down the streets in Caracat, and the director of a theater, a play theater, just put down his window and says, "Natasha, I got a job for you." And I was 16. And that has been my career. That has been my life. Basically, somebody comes up, I need you. And it was always in communications, like communications, marketing, journalists, And so basically, like, it's the first time in my life, and I've asked for it. I actually asked for it. Because I realized that all of my life, all of my entrepreneurial and business owners' life, I've always dealt with people that already knew me. That knew me, not necessarily and I was being drafted. Right. They come up to me and say, I want to work with you. I never had to sell.
Right.
Never had to sell.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I want to learn how to sell. Okay. And the universe just all aligned and just like, okay, you're going to learn. Because the thing is, I think we have a reach. I don't know if you read Sapien, and I love that book. It's actually an awesome book. And it's really about your community. And you can build relationships with around 150 people, like in physical world, right? But you need to have a vision beyond that in order to create a bigger network, and stuff like that. And then I realized that yeah, I had to build a bigger network. I had to, anyway, all to that to say that I'm doing communications, I'm doing marketing, but I'm also learning for myself and for others, for my clients and all of these things. But to build a world beyond ourselves,
Okay.
right? To how can we reach people that don't know you? And I think it's, I know you can only look at the dots looking back, and you know all of our lives has been like putting the dots in front, and you know, and at the end you're like, okay, this is why I've been. So basically, all of my life I've been groomed to be where I am today, and probably we've all been groomed to where we are today, and so I started as a journalist, then public relations, then communications, and then I fell into marketing by default because people are just like, I need marketing. I'm like, can you do this? Can you do that? And then I'll fall into what I'm doing, what we're doing now, because we have to change. We have to be with the, you know, with whether it's AI or whether it's automation, like we need to move forward. And for me to serve people was to make it like right now. I read this, I don't know, I think it was in 2007. It was a really early. I read this thing in Harvard Business, and it was saying the biggest challenge that we're going to have over the next 30 years are going to be labor force.
Right.
And at that time, they didn't use labor force. They used something like production or something like that. And I was like, how is that like, or you know? And I didn't understand it until like, I would say maybe 4 years, 5 years ago, where I was like, oh, that's what they meant, right? And so for me, my role as a marketer and as a communicator and as, the need to, I like to think of marketing and sales as resonance of understanding.
Okay. Yeah.
I resonate with you because I understand what you mean, right? And that's true communications for me, whether it's in sales or even today, like, we all understand, we all vibe to the same thing, right? And the next step was automation.
Right.
So it was an easy step for us to just say, we're gonna go from marketing to sales and marketing automation to serve a better purpose, to help people sleep better at night, like entrepreneurs sleep better at night, creative predictive models, and also to make sure that the peace of mind, and having a system that can go beyond your labor force, your existing teams, right? So yeah.
I'm wondering, like, you've all explained like having this kind of crossroad moment where things kind of clicked, and then it like, whether it's been like, I used to do it to sell art, now I do it to like empower artists to like actually do their art and to have a stage to do it, and then you being picked up for specific jobs, and then figuring out like, I want to, carve my own path in life, and then you building a business, and then building another business, and then it growing into something even bigger than that. Now that you're here today helping others, like, we always think about the KPIs of business being like revenue and, door swings and ticket sales and clients and things like that. Like, what are the KPIs that you measure, or what are the success metrics that you measure in terms of when you're helping other people, like whether it's artists or business owners or other doorpreneurs, right?
Another good question. You should have sent us the question before, right?
Never do.
How do we measure? I mean, obviously, like you said, ticket sales, revenue, it's a good measure. But I always tell my team, for us, it's about those magical moments, right?
Yeah.
Can a show create magical moments, and people are going to come out and talk about it?
Right.
And we strive for that. We aim for that. I mean, how many years have you heard about the show Not Gone? And then he came to the show, and I still remember he came over and he's like, Matt, sign me up for next year.
Cool.
I was blown away, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is the highest measure, right?
Right.
So I know now that he's probably gonna come back, and which is good for us, right?
Yeah.
So when we go to other markets, it's imperative that we do that.
Yeah.
And we see it, like the first time we went to Caracat, which was pre-pandemic. We weren't as good as we are now because you kind of grow and you learn, right? But when we went in 2023, we really made an impact. And then last year, 85% sold after 2 days, right?
Wow.
So you can really see that we made an impact in a small city, and then people got on board. So to me, that's kind of how we measure. Obviously, you need to make a profit because these shows are they're a nightmare in terms of logistic and work involved. Like people don't understand the work behind it, and it's just like you guys. Like in everything we do as an entrepreneur. Like I had someone the other day say, "Oh, geez, we see you guys everywhere," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's been 15 years, right?"
Yeah,
like it's,
That happened
and
yesterday.
when they say there's no overnight success, it's true,
Yeah.
and I see it now, right? Like it's been grinding and so many hours and years and some crying and some, right? Some ups and downs, but like finally after all these years, you kind of see like, okay, we're good. So you kind of continue on that path, right?
I know that one thing would be a lot of times the impact that you might have on the people that watch it, but what's the impact on the artists that are actually in it?
Yeah, it's tremendous, and we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
Like it's for people that don't know, we have a mix of professional artists, we have a mix of kind of that middle age and up and coming artists, we call them, and we have little ones as well. And the little ones, they're like so into it, and they've never done something like this, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, just the makeup, the photo shoot, the video shoot, being on a poster, being in the video, being in the story, being on the biggest stage in town in front of 2,000 people, right? So
That's cool.
that's, to them, they'll remember that for their entire life. And some artists have been in the show for like 10 years or 10 production, right? So there's definitely an impact on that front, and we don't talk about it enough, right? So people don't actually see all that behind the scene, but there's such a good vibe. Like when there's a show, and like the show coming up in June, we're 100 artists.
Wow.
So 100 local artists.
Holy shit.
Big group, but the energy backstage, it's hard to explain, right? Like they're
Makes it all worth it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they're the show, right? It's not me. Once we're there, it's all about them, right? So
They must see possibility of careers, right? That's the thing, right? Having a show like that, you can't necessarily see yourself doing that, like, and then when you give the opportunity to such a big production, and then they can see themselves probably like in the Cirque du Soleil or a national, like like you can't. I think you can't create it until you imagine it, right? And being in it is a great opportunity for young people.
During COVID, I didn't have anything to do, so I did like a web series, right, where we highlighted some of the shows, and there was this guy, Cameron, who was only 12. We got him on stage at the casino, and he was like, I think he was like 18 when we did the video, and he flat out said like, this changed my career path. He's a full-time musician now. He's been studying music, right? So he totally changed. Like he was just playing at the market for fun. But after doing the show, he was like, this is what I want to do for my life, right? So I didn't know. I was blown away when he said that in the video, because I had no idea. But it's just stuff that we do. We're so busy, right? You're just like, you're constantly doing stuff, and all of a sudden you're stopping like, oh my God, like I just changed someone's life, right? It's crazy. I love it.
But even like when you've stated that at first it was for a purpose, and then you've quickly shifted it into a purpose that's bigger than you, and doing that consistently, even though you may not be able to be physically in the moment every time that you impact someone, just the fact that you have that as your vision, it impacts everyone whether you're there or not, right? Which is incredible. So kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Natacha, we share the same world. However, I've never been an entrepreneur, and I'm really wondering because one thing that's always scared me about wanting to help others with marketing is first of all, teaching them how to do it. I find that a lot of times, I was talking about it yesterday on one of our podcasts, I find one thing that marketers do really well is create a lot of complication when in reality it's not that complicated.
True.
And our goal should always be to leave the room having empowered someone to be able to do it on their own.
I agree.
I'm wondering how you navigate through that. Like, how are you able to do that? Because obviously you're trying to create systems so that people, like, you can step away and they don't need to call you at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night.
I think that we're also stepping away from the traditional, and I would say, like, even the digital market, like that all done for you.
Yeah.
Right? Remember when we used to pay $9,000 for a tagline, right?
Yeah.
Now, you know, we go to the market by testing, by, you know, it's no longer, you know, we think that's going to work and then put it out and pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars and hoping that something is going to work. Now we're putting it out there, and then we're looking at what's coming out and how people are reacting to it. And I think the best thing that we can do today, because it's a commoditized industry, is to teach people how to do it, right? Because, you know, you can't, I would say the industry or the world is moving so fast that an agency can't keep up. Can't keep up, right? So I think we are, like WEVRR, my company is very different in that sense. Like, we teach how to build your marketing plans. Like, it's a 1 day, it's a 5-hour intensive marketing workshop on how to do your marketing plan. And we're using AI, and we're teaching people how to prompt, how to train, how to the outputs. We're doing the same thing with different, like a gap map, like understanding where you are, where you want to be, how to build your gap map, all kinds of things. And we do the same thing with that's Zach.
Do we know Zach?
Zach is the Magnetic Hill Winery. He's like my brother. He's like my brother just came in. Yeah, it's like, that's funny. So yeah, but I think that our role today as marketers, as senior marketers, because I teach junior marketers all the time, because they go to university, but they don't know the world. They don't know how it works. You know, and so we're there to help them not only understand how the mechanic works, but understanding the way that the psychology of the and the behavioral aspect of the consumer, because it's not just marketing to do like a web page or to do, it's to understand the process of behavior and understanding how conversion works, how the brain works, you know, like flee or fight, you know, as soon as I come up with something new, like the brain is going to react. So how do we get beyond that? How do we pass that? You know, so it's a really interesting path for me as an entrepreneur to see where we started, you know, in the 19s, okay, and to what we are today, and how to enable people to create more. And I see AI as an exoskeleton, something that will give you the strength that you need in places that you didn't think that you would need it. You know,
And it changes so fast. It's insane. It's hard to keep
up. Yeah. So
I almost wonder, is 5 hours enough with the business when you're going in to do with a marketing plan?
Yeah, actually it is. Yeah. And they're even having time to share about, no, it's intensive, but you know, if people come out with a full marketing plan, it's like crazy. Like people are go, oh my God, I didn't think we could do this.
And again, kind of the same situation, you're having an impact where like the light bulb moment, and they're getting excited, and that must be so encouraging. Doing that.
But see, it was a process that I've learned to do in 27 years. Like I had my framework and all of this, and like I was saying earlier, like I wanted to create an AI that would build your marketing plan. So basically I took my own thought of 2017, you know, and saying, okay, how can I build this now? So now that it's available. So basically I build it for them and I just walk them through. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really cool.
And Tony, I mean, like when I think of property management, I always think that it's one of these really reactive roles. Like I have a duplex, so I wouldn't call myself a property manager in any way whatsoever. But I find myself that anytime that I'm servicing my tenants is if something happens.
Yes.
Right? And so to be doing it at scale, you need to be way more proactive than reactive. And I feel to build a business where you're empowering others, you have to build that proactiveness for them. How do you do that?
Yeah, property management is it's an incredibly detailed business model.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart, and it's kind of you live or die by your systems.
Right.
So, luckily, before starting the management company, I was a software engineer with IBM. So I did that for 15 years.
Yeah.
So, tech, building stuff out, building, workflows, whether if it's automations and kind of doing all this stuff. Really, I didn't know at the time, really helped me with the management stuff because we got into it. I knew a little bit about it by watching my mom do it, but I didn't see the inner workings of it. So we quickly realized we grew the company very fast, and then we realized that this could all disappear tomorrow if we don't get these systems done right. So we put, and we still do to this day, put a ton of energy behind that. And so, things like maintenance, right? There's a thing called preventative maintenance, right? Trying to be ahead of the game before things actually fail. However, that being said, when you're managing stuff for third party, i.e. for other investors, you can recommend being proactive in a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, you're always reaching for somebody's wallet. So it's challenging. It's tough, right? I can tell a client that I'm like, you need to do this because it's going to save you money down the road, but if he's got no money to do it now, he's not doing it. So we have to ride that. And it's very hard for the team. So everybody that works for me has to be okay with change. They have to be okay with speed. They have to be okay with very high highs and a lot of lows, probably more lows, just because of it's a tough environment to be in. But we build architecture, we build technology, we build systems to have automatic reminders to be as proactive as we can when it comes to maintenance, lease renewals, stuff like that to go to tenants. But it has its challenges, but we do the best that we can.
Do you remember the first system that you put in place that was successful?
100%. Yeah, applications.
Yeah.
So this was pre-COVID, right before COVID started, and everybody's kind of like panicking a little bit. And all of our leases were done in person. So my leasing agent would show a unit, they like it, and they'd say, "We'll go to the office and they'll sign the lease." So they would come to the office, and it would be an hour conversation with my administrative person doing the lease, explain it to them. And I'm like, guys, this is the perfect opportunity to take all this online to the cloud, right? So we then transitioned, built the stack, and now everything was automated. So tenants would do the application online, they get approved, they'd be sent an electronic signature, they'd sign it, and everybody's happy. What was interesting about that was the client got better service, it was done faster, the leases were done much more efficiently, and I saved one FTE, a full-time effort. So I didn't need that employee to do that anymore. So without knowing it, I kind of saved myself around 40 grand a year in staff costs to do that. So that was like a huge dive into technology, into automations and all that stuff. But that was our very first kind of like aha moment, to where it changed everything for us.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, when you're all like, you're starting off your business and things are like the wheels are getting in place and you're starting to see like, oh, there's an opportunity to scale here and all that. Like, I'm thinking when you're doing something for other people, like you obviously never want to sacrifice helping others, but you're also always mindful of like profit, right? And how do you differentiate again, coming back to the first thing that you said is like, at first it was for a specific purpose that was to sell art, and then I quickly went over into doing it for something else, and now I'm scaling it, I'm doing more shows, there's 100 artists now coming off all of that. You're obviously making profit in that, but how do you not sacrifice still putting people first?
We don't. I think sometimes I prefer to lose and have a very happy person than to, but those choices are hard to make too, right? But yeah, even if you give extra, you know, at some point it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
You know, like having somebody happy is probably the most most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think also knowing, having a very, very clear picture of who your client avatar is,
Okay.
and being able to say no to the people that don't fit your box.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? We started off, we would work with any property, any owner, anything.
Okay.
I want doors, I want doors, I need to grow, I need to be big and scale.
Yeah.
And that nearly killed us.
Okay.
Trying to do all these things that didn't make any sense. And there are certain situations to where if you know your model well enough, that sometime you're not going to meet the expectations, and I know it doesn't make sense for me financially to do that.
Yeah.
So we just decide not to go down that route.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of people, that just comes with experience. You gotta lose a few bucks before you can kind of make that,
Yeah.
or you gotta really, or the other extreme is you kind of make some people upset, and you kind of learn from it.
Yeah.
And you adjust and you adjust. But yeah, I think for us, it's always doing stuff in the best interest of our owners and our properties and our tenants,
Right.
which can get very complex sometimes
sure, yeah.
because they have competing wants and needs,
Yeah.
but never at the expense of, well, I need to make $1, so one of these guys are going to lose.
Right.
So
Right.
that's usually not a good way to look at it.
Right.
So
And it's huge. Like I'll say, like I think people will have difficulty saying no in a lot of situations because it's like that fear of not pleasing the other party, right? Like it's I think in all of us, some have a lot of it and some very little, but I think we all have that people pleasing tendency where
100%.
there's a certain wanting to be worthy and valued to other people that comes from not disappointing them.
Yeah.
Right, and that's always a challenging part.
In
right?
my world, yes men get us in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I have some team members that are always promising and under delivering,
Yeah.
that's a major disaster.
Yeah.
So we gotta stay clear of those things.
And I think as you start as an entrepreneur, you want to say yes to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, and been there, done that. It took me a long time to realize that.
Yeah.
But now, and I think most entrepreneurs would say that I follow the little voice, right? The intuition. Like, if it doesn't feel right, guess what? It's not going to go well, right?
Yeah.
So I always try to say, okay, well, we know we're not going to make money on this project, but if it feels really right, we're going to go for it if we can do it. And 9 times out of 10, I would say 9.9 out of 10, something else comes out of it.
Yep.
Right? You don't know what. It could be a couple years, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I did that project, met that person, that person did this, became one of my biggest sponsor.
Yep.
And I have so many stories like that
Oh,
where did something for someone and all of a sudden like he's the person who sponsored 4 shows and that's why we're like doing like a tour, right?
Yeah.
So if it feels right, but if it feels wrong and you still
It
try to
usually
do
is
it,
wrong,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be wrong. So
Don't force it.
no, don't force it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like I love what you say about the yes men, right? It's like that, when you're saying yes to everyone, no matter what, there is going to be someone that's going to be disappointed by the yes that you've said to another person, right?
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
It will happen, and it sets the wrong. I think it sets the wrong precedent for everybody else. So if you have a team, that's a larger team, and one person is kind of showing up in that way, and then everybody else is different, then it can, it's kind of like doesn't really do too well from a culture perspective. But also often I've found that the yes person can get other people mixed up into trouble things because they've overpromised something that wasn't doable from other people. So
I think it's just about establishing your boundaries, right?
Yeah,
This is respecting yourself, right? And like somebody's like, oh well, Natasha, you could write a marketing plan, like it's the typical, you can write a marketing plan in 5 hours. I can, but the thing is that it took me 27 years to get there,
to the
right?
5
The same thing
hours,
with you, same thing with you, right? And that's often what people forget about art, about it's, we're not just doing, it's not just a career.
Yeah.
It's something that we've created. It's
Yeah.
like our process and procedures we have created, right? It's ours, it's our IP, it's our systems, right?
Yeah.
And you can't just steal it and just say, hey, well, you know,
Yeah.
just pay less for it,
Well,
right?
and a lot of people like to want to be in the seat of the person that's been really successful, but they forget quickly about the journey that got them there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And 27 years is a damn long time of
Grinding.
successful parts and really
Yep.
the
The
highs
ups and
and
downs
highs,
and the
lows and lows,
crying,
yeah.
right? It's like,
So and I think you have to go through that.
Absolutely.
Like I heard recently, whether it was a podcast or something like that, that you know, there's a certain amount of experience that you need to go through in order to get the lessons, and I think that in life there isn't a better teacher than the experience that you're gonna have yourself, because it's like the test shows up even before you even like actually get the time to get the theory. It's like it's right in your face. However, there are some things that you can learn from the experience of others, but no matter what, you have to go and sharpen your sword like on the battleground, like,
Absolutely.
which is super super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see it with the young generation. Like it's hard for them to, especially the ones that kind of did their school during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and they've been like kind of locked out. Like
Mhm.
and now they're like, it's almost like they're afraid a little bit to be out there and have that experience and just, you know, get the job, get the experience, and then try to be an entrepreneur. So like, I don't know about you guys, but for the longest time, I had a full-time job and I was doing my business side hustle, right?
Okay.
And it was tough. It was so tough, right? So you get home at 6 o'clock and boom, you get into your
other
business,
job.
right? But it's probably the best thing I did, because I could kind of start slow, move up, and then, you know, when it was time to say goodbye to a marketing agency that I've been there for 10 years,
Okay.
and my boss wanted to offer me a VP position, I was like, no, I'm just gonna quit and do my art, right?
Wow.
I still remember his face. He was like, "You're gonna do what? Right? Have you seen the salary?" You know? So yeah, so I think you just have to go out there and you have to kind of do the work first to get there, right?
Have you all always wanted to do exactly what you're doing? Like, you've kind of answered my question there, but has it been the same for you? Have you been like, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Since I think I started working, my first job I was 12.
Okay.
So, not necessarily property management.
Right.
That was a surprise.
Yeah.
But owning a business 100%.
Yeah.
Do you remember what would have been at the time? Do you remember the business you wanted to own?
No, I just wanted to be rich. I'm like, I equated a few things. Luckily, my mom was in the property management business.
Yeah.
So, and we were also, so she was the VP and she was the resident manager in the apartment building that we lived in. And from a young age, I remember going into the office and seeing her owners and talking to them. And at a pretty young age, I made the connection between apartment buildings and these rich business owners. So I'm like, oh, there's something there,
Okay.
like owning real estate, owning
Right.
investments and all these apartment buildings.
Right.
So that I learned super young, but it wasn't my first thing.
Okay.
I tried a bunch of other things. Technology was my first love.
Yeah.
I thought I would be in that space somehow. But sometimes life has a way of pointing you in the direction that you were
Yeah.
always meant to be in.
Yeah.
And I was meant to follow in my mom's footsteps and do what I do. So, yeah.
But in the same way, your analytical mind
Oh.
brought you here, like because you were able to see property management from a different perspective of
different.
what other
100%.
peoples are doing
Correct.
because of
Yes.
that
Definitely.
analytical mind. Yeah, that's
Yep.
really cool.
100%.
Do you kind of remember when this?
I was 13 years old. I went to see my dad and I said, "Dad, you got to give me about $30,000. I want to invest in blue chips. I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 55." He said, "No, I've been working since ever." Since. That's true. Yeah. No, it's funny. And but I think yeah, at a very young age, like I think being a woman is somehow different from being a man,
Sure.
right? And because you know, I'm older too, and this is the you know, it's like kind of to be a girl wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to be like take down barriers. I traveled the world. You know, I walked on the ancient Baghdad. I bought a motorcycle and, you know, toured Japan on my own. Like I did crazy stuff, right? And the thing is, I never had fear of anything.
Right.
And so when because at some point, I think I was 14 years old, I realized, and I think that's the moment that's really the moment I became an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Is I realized that I had to take care of myself, that nobody else would be taking care of me, and I forged my way through everything. Through, like, I got attacked by friggin' wild boars and stuff like that, but I knew that I was going to get out of it on my own, right? And when you have that perspective of being able to rely on yourself, and I think that's the thing with entrepreneurs, we have each other. We have each other. And especially in New Brunswick, we have such a beautiful community of entrepreneurs. Like, we can call anybody. Like, I can call Tony and and just say, hey, like, I need your help, and he's probably going to say yes, right? We're tight, but we know that for sure that our faith in being able to push through is the one thing that makes us different.
Wow. Yeah. Are you an only child?
Nope.
Oh, wow.
No, her brother almost came in.
Brother.
We're different.
Do you think that being from Atlantic Canada or building a business in Atlantic Canada develops a different type of entrepreneur? Like, did it build some sort of like resilience, or like we talked about it a little bit before, and I think that it's part of what we're trying to do on the podcast is like, I personally, when I look at entrepreneurs that are in Atlantic Canada, and I look at a lot of the really cool stories of people that have done cool things here, they're so humble that they don't even want to share that they've done it. They're like, you know, they kind of trudge along, and there's someone that you bump into at the grocery store or whatnot, and it might be, you know, someone that has 2,000, 3,000 doors, and it might be a guy that has a production with thousands of, the shows and stuff like that, but we don't celebrate it in a way. But I'm wondering, like, does that experience, regardless of the humbleness, there a certain type of like grit that you develop? Like, what makes it different building a business here?
Demography.
Yeah.
Like, in the sense that when we're thinking about New Brunswick, it's a city.
Right.
It's a city. Like, when you're like, it's 800,000 people. It's a city. Yeah. So when you want to launch a business in New Brunswick, you have to be able to export. You have to be able to, like, it's not the same game as opening anything in Toronto, right? So you have to be able to understand your market very, very clearly, to understand, can I make it here? And if I can't make it here, what do I need to do to make it, right? And I think about some people like Dwight Fraser that built this empire from Woodstock. Or Wallace McCain, built this global company from the same corner of the world. And I think that we have to look beyond New Brunswick as entrepreneurs because of demography. And I think that's the biggest. I would say that's the biggest challenge for New Brunswickers, is to get beyond that population, the mass of being able to sell, right? You know, you're limited. Whatever you want, you're limited.
I think I look at it from a little bit of a different perspective. I think in the way that a lot of people starting businesses here think that it's very different from a lot of different places.
Right.
And my experience and my journey is that I think that we're whether from a city in Atlantic Canada or if I'm in a suburb of New York or if I'm in California, I think that there's a lot of similarities.
Right.
To the extent to where I had that thought process to where when I was 19 and I finished college, I was like, I got to get out of here.
Right.
What we talked about.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's nothing here for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have no future in Moncton.
Right.
And I was convinced. So I'm like, I need to go to Toronto. And that's what I did. Moved to Toronto at 22 and then started working at IBM. And it wasn't until that I got a global perspective, because I traveled all over the place with these guys.
Yeah.
And I learned that business is business.
Right.
Depending on what you're selling and what type of business you're in, I do agree that there could be some challenges being in a small place depending on what you're trying to grow.
Yeah.
But from where I sat in terms of a local home service type business or the type of thing that I wanted to set up, was I didn't see anything different from whether if it was in China, whether if it was in California, whether if it was in Germany, whether if it was here or there, that I really figured out that I need to get back home because I can do what I want to do here. And how special would that be if I could do it here?
Right.
And just show everybody that you don't need to go to Toronto, you don't need to go to Montreal, especially now with technology and how everything's open, the Zoom, like all that stuff. There's no more borders.
Right.
Like I coach people from all over the globe that are calling this little guy in a little city in Moncton with 150,000 people, how to grow and scale a property management company because they don't know how to do it and they don't see it.
Right.
So I think there's so many of those things. I think it's just a matter of the entrepreneur, the person, the belief in what they're doing, and really having the courage to put themselves on a global stage and not let Moncton define who they are. So much more. But we can enjoy being here and living in this amazing community and doing our thing. So
and we're still kind of unknown, which is good, but during COVID we saw like, oh, people from Ontario were like, oh, what's this little place here with all this real estate?
And by the way, no, I didn't mean to say that we're stuck in Moncton or in New Brunswick. I'm saying that the demography is a challenge and we have to look beyond, right? Like you did, you go all around the world, but sometimes we are limited by our vision. And and in most of, I think the most challenging part is our vision of ourselves. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like we, for the longest time for us, I was always asking myself, like, are we good enough? Right? So Maritimers were like, are we good enough? Right? We're so small. We recently had a project in Montreal. We did 7 mini shows in over a weekend. It was a big deal for us, and people loved it. So we were like, okay, well, damn, we're good enough, right? So you finally realize that you're good enough to be outside the Maritimes. And also just to you guys' point, I think it has to do a lot on the product itself. So for us, it's actually easier to be in a smaller market because there's less competition.
That's true.
So when we go to Caracat, everyone knows we're there.
Right.
Everyone, right? The whole city comes, right? But when you go to a bigger city like Halifax, for us, it's everything's more expensive. There's more competition. I think last time there was like 6 other shows the same night, right? So it's really tough. So you put all your money into one date or a couple. Well, we had 3 nights, but still, like, there's competition every night, right? So it's super tough. So sometimes it depends on what you're selling. For sure.
I love that, like, what I find that resonates between all 3 of you is that self-belief is really important. It's like, regardless of your circumstances, being able to understand that you're capable of doing it is really the first step, right? And if you don't have that part there, it doesn't matter if you're in Caracat or in Halifax or in China or Japan, it's not going to work, right? So, I'm wondering, like, for the 3 of you in terms of you've obviously got specific values that help guide you with businesses. What I'm really actually wondering is, what are some of your non-negotiables in doing business, whether it's internally or externally? Tony, you talked a little about like, you know, now we kind of know what our client avatar is, and we say no more than we say yes.
Yep.
Are there things that are non-negotiables with the things that you do?
Yeah, don't deal with assholes.
Oh, that's a great one. I think everybody should have that one. Right on the top of the board there.
But sometimes we don't know it, right? You get into a relationship, and then like, you know, business relationship, and then all of a sudden you see that the way that they talk to your staff, and you're like, where did that come from, right? And it's and then and also, how do you deal with it when it's, you know, a huge project and stuff like that? How do you deal with it? How do you manage and protect your staff, protect the people that you love, protect their integrity and their dignity, right? And it's not because you're paying, you know, thousands of dollars that it gives you any right to bully anybody.
100%.
So that's my number one.
I've to kind of put a personal note on that, I've read a few times, which I find is a very common one, that people say, like, what are red flags in like finding a partner, and a lot of times it's if they're assholes to like waiting staff.
Exactly.
That's like a good one to know, like that's like that's their personality. Right. So
I'll bring my future clients to lunch.
Bring them to lunch first. To your favorite waiter.
That's got my new always.
Exactly. What about both of you? Any non-negotiables? I feel like for you, having local artists in there is a non-negotiable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's our business model.
Yeah.
Right. So it's for us, it's the magic of fusion. That's I always say that because I'm convinced if we had a group kind of touring, it wouldn't be the same. Right. It wouldn't be as magical. That doesn't mean that we don't do some one-off and we use the same artists, which we are starting to do more, which I love. So that Montreal project was kind of a one-off, and we got hired by a company in St. John to do something in November, and in Kim Breton as well, and in November as well. So those are kind of one-off, which will use the same artist most likely, but you know, non-negotiable for me is follow that little voice that I chatted about. So I know it sounds cheesy, but I can look back. You were talking about the dots, like you can turn around and look at the dots behind you, and now it all makes sense, right? But every good thing that happened to me is because I follow that little voice, right? So, and also don't cut the budget for quality. Right? Like we have huge budget for our shows, and every year, every time it comes down to like, are we gonna do this? Like some performance could be like $3,000, just one performance, 2 minutes. Right? When you put everything together, when you put the costumes, the props, the time, everything, but it's worth it, right? So I've never, and a lot of people have told me like, oh well, don't you care about the bottom line? Yes, I do. But we're not necessarily in the bottom line business, right? That doesn't mean we don't make money. It means that I don't want to sacrifice the experience just because of money, right? So don't get me wrong, we have budget, we follow budget, but sometimes
that's how you build a budget.
So for me, like that's super important. So when someone's like, how come you're not using that and you're using this instead? I'm like, because that's what we want, that's what makes the more sense.
My inner voice told me.
Yeah, exactly. See, you get it.
I think the topic of non-negotiables is quite interesting. And there's a lot of facets to it that you could probably look into. I would say that there's a lot from a business perspective, but the way that I'll answer it that's maybe a little bit different from you guys is personal non-negotiables in life, right? Because it was beat into me by my coach, 10, 15 years ago that, if you're not performing at your best, then it's hard to provide for others to get them to perform their best. Kind of like the whole airplane analogy, you put your mask on first, right?
Right,
and then you help others. So I think for me, it's kind of simple. For me in my life, there's like these 4 domains that are non-negotiable, right? So body, taking care of yourself physically, health, all that stuff. Spiritually, so being is what we call it, is reconnecting to source and to your creator and figuring out what that means to you. Then we have balance, which is more of a world of always being connected to your spouses and your kids, and doing things every day that what we call, we make the acronym of like, what are my daily deposits?
Right.
So whether if it's a text to each one of my kids, it's a text to my wife, I love you, I appreciate you, I'm grateful for you, all that type of stuff. And then it's business, right? So for me, it's all about learning and sharing, learning and teaching, right? So every day, a non-negotiable is to learn something new, and then to take that information and share it with somebody.
Sweet.
And whatever that looks like. It could be a conversation, it could be Facebook Live, it could be whatever it is, right? And then that, if you do that over a consistent amount of time, then a lot of things just get really good, right? Business is good, your family's good, hopefully you're in good health. And like those to me are non-negotiables that then drive everything else in life, because it's like all encompassing, and it's probably been one of the hardest investments, but probably the best ROI on anything that I do with my time.
And I'll say that, you know, I hope that you know I'm younger than all of you here.
No.
You're surprised, I'm pretty young.
You do look really young. But as like my experience in my 30s, and I'm just halfway there, has been about understanding that it's more about peeling off the layers of things that are not that important, and it's really difficult because you spend a lot of your 20s gaining experience and saying yes to a lot of stuff that you should have probably said no to, and getting into trouble and things like that. But it's kind of part of the ride of being in your 20s. But when you get to that point where you start peeling off those layers, I think I really love how you've put a system in place of things that are non-negotiables. And they're simple, there's not a lot of them, but with so little, you do so much more, right? Because that consistency there in your life, like that impact there is way huger than like, oh, I have to do this exciting thing every single week and post it on social media and people think that I'm doing really great things. It's like, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, and usually after a lot of those experiences, you feel more empty than filled up. I feel how you've put it. It made me feel full just hearing it, right? So
100%.
Should have brought a notebook. It's like, oh,
I actually saw some post that Tony did last year, and it inspired me to start doing something similar, which you probably don't know this, but you know, I've started reading 15 minutes every day.
Wow.
Right. Never done that before. Constantly going to the gym at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow, good.
Like even now with the show is in 3 weeks, the biggest show of the year, working 15 hours a day easily, and I still non-negotiable going to the gym. So those little things has helped tremendously.
You think of the breadcrumb trails that it leaves behind. Not only for like your family, your staff, your friends. Like if they see that you take nutrition, you take the gym, you take exercise, you do all these things, it's incredible. Like then you start to influence other people without even knowing that you're doing so. I'm just living my life, and I have the courage enough, and I tell everybody, I'm like, don't be afraid to share your story, because you don't know somebody that's 2 steps behind you that may need to hear that.
Exactly.
But they don't connect to the big Cody Sanchez's and all these like different personalities and Homozis and all that stuff. Something that you said will probably have a bigger impact on a local entrepreneur than these other guys did. So, you know, I think of Dan Martell. Dan Martell is a local boy. He's doing some incredible things right now. He's blowing up. And I love a lot of the principles that he's putting out there in terms of what are some things that are really important to him, and he talks about them on a consistent basis to leave the breadcrumbs to hopefully other people take that seriously. And it's like, you know, look at this stuff, right? And for our kids too.
There's a huge impact in the proximity of having done certain things that have impacted your life and then sharing it with others. That doesn't happen when you watch the videos on social media or read the books, because it's you get curious and interested in those things because there's popularity around it, but sometimes you don't connect as deeply as if Tony tells me like, hey, I text my kids every day just to tell them I hope you have a good day, or hey, hope your soccer practice went well, or whatnot. Like, they'll do that before the thing that Alex or Mosey says in their book to get them 100 leads for their gym, right? Because that is like, man, I see Tony every single day, how happy he is, how driven he is, how his kids look at him and all that. I want that, right? So.
But it's often like, I think that, you know, we share. Dan has been a big part of our lives, right? He's been a big impact in our lives, and I think that. He always said to me, he's like, always pick somebody that is like, many years ago, Dan and I were sitting for a coffee, and he said to me, I said, Dan, because when he sold before Clarity, Flowtown, he went into a little depression after selling, because you know, it's your company is often everything that you are, right? And then so I was like, so we knew that he was going to sell Clarity. As I said, Dan, what are you going to do? And he said to me, he said, I'm going to be the Tony Robbins of SaaS. 4 years later, I could say that he was, right? And so last summer, or last time he was in town, is we went for a walk, and I said, remember Dan when we did, like, you know, you said that? And I said, and you did it in 4 years. And he looked at me and said, and now I'm going to be the Dan Martel of the world.
Wow,
and
cool.
Sometimes it's all about self-actualization, right? And sometimes you need a model to get you out of where you are in order to see who you are, right? And I think that Tony has been a great influence on a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people. When I saw what you did last year with, you know, your self-development and stuff like that, and he's being vulnerable about it, right? And then it's not a lot of people that are willing to put themselves out there and to show that it's not all sparkles and glitter and, you know, and diamonds and stuff like that. And I think that when a person is close to where you are, but not there yet, they can hold on to that image until they figure out who they are and how they can be the Dan Martel of the world, right? Or the Tony, you know, LeBlanc of the world, or the Matt. Am I between two LeBlancs here?
You are.
Non-related.
Tell me a little bit about this self-development that what Natasha's talking about.
So last year, I attended let's call it a spiritual journey with some plant medicine. And kind of changed the game for me.
Really?
Yeah. It was something that it wasn't for business. It was more on the personal level.
Right. Yeah.
So my wife and I went up there with some, we went up there with some ideas in terms of things that we wanted to work on.
Okay.
And so I had some preconceived notions of what I wanted to go there, what I wanted to work on.
Yeah.
Empathy was a big thing. Reconnecting to some other things inside, building on our relationship as a couple.
Yeah.
And we got that times 1,000,000.
Wow.
And it's been, so when you do those types of things, experiences, there's a long integration process, because the moment of going through that medicine and kind of seeing and experiencing what you do, it's wild. Right. And so the last year I've been integrating that, and a big part of that is I was exposed to something that I never knew was possible, and then they kind of gave us some tools coming back. And if one of them, if I can make the recommendation, it's a book called No Bad Parts, and it's talking about IFS, which is called Internal Family Systems. It's a form of therapy, and it's really a beautiful and simple way to start getting to know all the different parts of yourself, and to start healing them internally. So one of the core exercises is identifying a core wound. What made you who you are today? And for me, it was abandonment. So my father left when I was super young. So anybody ever asked me, well, why do you do what you do? And I was like, to get my dad's love, right? It's big. And then I do it to make my mom proud.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
and then you take all that, and then you work on these parts over and over and over, and you're trying to heal them.
Yeah.
And it's a rough journey. There's a lot to it, and it's So that experience like cracked open something that's like crazy.
I can tell that it's
Oh
very,
yeah, it's very, very raw.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing it's a daily practice, but it's like it's almost been a year, and it's almost like it's been intensifying and intensifying and intensifying.
Yeah.
Of I'm connecting the dots.
Yeah,
I'm connecting
yeah.
the dots,
Yeah.
right? We talked about that, and it's like, is it possible that he left when I was 2, and coincidentally, I left my ex-wife when my son was 2, but I needed to go through that so that I could show up differently for my kids.
Right. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
The experience of going through like therapy or anything like that, like I just relate last year, and it's like I think a lot of people they I think we've all grown up in a certain sense where like mental health and things like that were very not well. I'll say taboo, but I think it's just it was always like this thing where either it isn't something that we tried to heal medically in a sense, and also it was a lot of times seen as like, oh, there's something wrong with that person, right? It was never seen like, okay, we need to heal that to make the person better, not because they're a shitty person or there's something wrong with them. It's just everybody has something that is part of their experience, good or bad, that sometimes we don't have the answers to, especially if you have an experience when you're really young, sometimes it's even hard to remember that it happened the way that it happened, but that impact is there like throughout your whole life, and until you work through those things, it's still going to impact it in ways that are subconscious, right?
But I think that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think for me my number one need is growth. Personal growth. Like I'm all about growth. Like this is my life, is how do we take out the friction in becoming better, not necessarily a better person, but just being, right? And we're not all connected. Like Matt here, that just step into his intuition and just makes magic. The flow. But I think that entrepreneurship for many entrepreneurs, your belief as an entrepreneur will impact everything that you do.
Right.
You will see that in everybody, right? But I would say that the friction of it in your life as an entrepreneur will stop you from doing great things because of your own belief or values, right? So I think that's the biggest self-development path is becoming an entrepreneur, because you need to get things out of the way. You need to to figure out who you are. You need to be able to be a good leader. You need to have compassion. You need to be to find who you are in order to support, because your role as an entrepreneur is very simple, is supporting other people in becoming more and becoming better, and in supporting them and supporting their businesses, and and etc. So
it does start within you. You got to be able to support yourself, right? So no, it's a beautiful
stand yourself too.
Yeah, that's true. I always kind of finish yesterday. It's a couple of last episodes where they're like, I know you're always going to ask this question and I never prepare for it, but it's very fitting that I'm asking all of you because of all of the things that you've shared so far. I always wonder if you were at the moment where things started to really work out. I mean, there were maybe bumps on the roads and whatnot. If you had the knowledge that you have today and you were back to that starting point, per se, what's one thing that you wish you could take from what you know today that you could have applied at that time?
Well, I would say trade fear for faith. I think so. I think for me, basically denying any doubt was a game changer. Yeah.
You did it from a young age too. Yeah, I love that.
Personally, for me, it would have been, I would have probably started the inner work a lot earlier.
Yeah.
Because when you're young and you're in the excitement of growing something and building something, the last thing you're thinking about is stopping and meditating for 2 hours and trying to, connect yourself and, talk to God, as, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's the deeper that I've gotten into it over the years, it's always had the highest payoff. Right. There's always another strategy. There's always another way to get another client. There's always another way to make a buck here or do this or do that. But there's only, certain amount of time and certain things that you can do to like figure yourself out and to connect with those things. So I think I've probably not wasted, like I don't regret anything, but if I go back to like 10, 15 years and have started that work a little bit earlier, I think that, maybe my relationships would have been that much better, or maybe there would have been a bigger impact earlier on, but
still lots of time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
Life is
I'm still
very
happy.
short, but also very long.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think for me it's just to realize that the path is already there. Like I spent so many years trying to figure out and being stressed on like, is this gonna work? Like, should I continue? Right? But so now that I look back, I'm like, oh, have I wasted my time doing this? Have I wasted my time doing that? But no, it's all part of the path, right? So I started as a marketer, worked 10 years for an advertising agency, which is stuff that I apply today, right? And I was able to start something on the side, being an artist. Did that for a long time, but that brought me to shows, which now that's super busy, and I feel that's going to bring me something else, right? So now I'm less trying to figure out the path and just kind of continuing it what I do, and it's going to happen, right? So we all have our path done already. We just don't know it, right? So
usually if where you're looking down the path, if it's really dark, you're probably on the right path, right? It's not to know all the answers, and sometimes you have to have no fear at all in order to cross through those boundaries, and you'll find yourself along the way, right?
Absolutely.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's crazy that we got into all these conversations that honestly I wasn't even expecting that we were going to. I always come in with somewhat of a plan, but I love everything that you've brought to the table. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm wishing you all the best with continuing to empower your communities with what you do, because it's it's incredible to see that it's happening right here, but you're also for sure having impact all across farther than just Moncton, right? And I hope that you continue to do that for many years to come. So
thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
For coming on.
Thank you, man.
yeah,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.